lovely to have all of you here. And Doreen, it's great that you're back. And also welcome to all of our viewers. We hope you're going to enjoy today's deLight discussion. And we're just going to build out on our communication topic from last week. So we're going to start somewhere with Susanne. She's just going to break down the principles for us regarding communication, conflict management, and what the word says with regards to this topic. Thank you, Susanne.
Thank you, Monique. Yes, I think this might be one of the, if not the hardest topic, I think, to kind of dive into. I really did struggle a lot with this, and I think I heard someone say something over the weekend that kind of had me feel like I now understand why I still struggle with this topic. So he said, if we understand something with head knowledge, then, and it's not a revelation yet, we tend to fall back into our old habits. But once God has given us revelation about that specific topic, it's like we tend to walk in it easier, and we tend to share it from the heart. And I realize there's a lot of things within communication, and especially within conflict management, that God still needs to reveal to me and reveal his part about. And I think that's why it was great that we chose this topic, because I could feel that he was truly trying to break something open for me within us preparing and getting these questions under the light. So just to jump in, I think the main thing that I experienced when I started to pray about this and think about the principles was God bringing me back to his nature and saying, but who do you know me as? How do you experience me in terms of my nature and my character? And if you look throughout the word, the beautiful thing is that we serve a relational God. We serve a God and we love a God who yearns for relationship. And as we all know, in Genesis, that relationship was broken. Although it was never severed, it was broken. And throughout the word of God, we see him wanting to bring his people back to his heart, longing to have his people back in a relationship with him, and having to struggle with these adulterous people who kept on running away and running to the worldly things. And throughout that, we get to know his character as one who perseveres, one who's zealous for our hearts, and one who will always turn to us when we turn to him, and who will hear and who will answer. And so that was something that sparked my heart and just gave me this feeling of, if we see him as that, and if we experience him as that, and I think every believer will say that they do, then it gives us the brilliant and the perfect example of how we need to be in our relationship. It's not an easy example for sure. It's a very hard example to follow, but there is a beautiful example in that persistence and in that zealous love for others and the yearning to have our hearts connected. And I think if we know God, we have a love for people. That is what he manifested, what Jesus manifested, and what his heart is. So first of all, for me, it's to know that relationships is key for God, and therefore communication is something that we need to work at every single day, whether we feel we fail or whether we feel we've made some progress. It is our responsibility. Something else that I found that kept on coming back to me during this week as I was pondering these questions is, how do I hear God speak? When God does speak to me and when I sit in his presence and I wait for him to answer, how do I experience him? And throughout my walk with God, I can keep on saying that it's never a shout. It's never in a bombastic or in a prideful manner. It's never coming over harsh. It's always in a soft way. It's always in a way that always I need to get still and quiet to really hear. Otherwise, I'm going to miss it. And so there's this soft spokenness and this gentleness about our God that I love and that excites me. And that brings me back to the place where I realize when I work with others, how do I come about the experience? Do I force my opinion on people? Do I expect others to listen and listen immediately? Or do I have that soft-spoken, gentle nature that God keeps on modeling to us. When we look at a tree, it is known by its fruit. A tree is known by its fruit. And so the fruit of the Spirit gives us a picture of the Spirit. It gives us a picture of the nature of the Spirit and what we can expect when we take this Spirit. When we think of God speaking to us, sometimes because of our reverence and our healthy respect for God, we tend to think of Him as speaking in a very stern and a very, what is the word that I'm looking for? Very ernstig in Afrikaans would be say, way. But if we think of the Spirit actually says to us that the Spirit communicates with love and the Spirit communicates joyfully. There's joy when God speaks to us, and He wants to convey that joy. There's peace when He speaks to us. There's always the peace that comes when He speaks. He's got a patient manner with us because He knows that we sometimes don't hear. Or when we hear, we don't always do what He abide in what He's asking us or telling us. There's a kindness way that God speaks to us. There's a beautiful kindness in the way that He approaches us, and there's always good. It's always good when He speaks. From His speaking comes life, and therefore good. He speaks faithfully. He doesn't say one thing and not do it. When He speaks, He keeps to His word. He keeps to His word. Jeremiah 55. He speaks gently. There's gentleness in the way that our Father picks us up, puts us on His lap, and speaks to us as His children. And then there's self-control. He's never the one who forces us into a specific place. He gives us choice and He gives us opinion, and He lets us make our choice. And when we make the wrong choice and we turn away, He's always there, arms wide open, waiting for us to run back. And that is something that I feel is such a critical principle in how we are supposed to communicate with others. Do we see ourselves communicating in this manner, or are we intrusive and hard to please, and maybe very opinionated when it comes to the way that we talk to others? And so these are the key aspects that I think was important for me when I thought about communication specifically. Just to quickly touch on conflict handling, I think once again, if we look at the Spirit also teaches us about conflict handling. Because if we handle conflict with kindness and with patience and with self-control and with joy, realizing that there's an opportunity to learn and to be to learn from and to teach someone else something, we're going to approach it differently. We're not going to see it as an argument or a war of opinions that needs to be won. We're going to go in with a different attitude. And our heart's attitude will ultimately determine how the conflict will be resolved. But I think what is important to know is that God asks us to first of all discuss whatever was the topic of conflict with that specific person. His word, He said, go and speak to each other privately about this specific topic. Communicate about it and see if you can come to a resolution. And if you cannot, you go to that person with one or two other people so that you've got witnesses in that specific situation, that you can communicate with witnesses. And then lastly, if that person is not open for that change that you're wanting to come from it, then you can bring it to the church and you can ask the church. And if that person still is not willing, then God says, turn your back and move away from the situation. And I think that just once again tells us how God perseveres. There's not just a writing off of people and saying, you know what, I don't have time for this anymore. God pursues us. He relentlessly pursues us and His relationship with us. And I think that's a valuable thing that we can learn from Him, and in the way that He approaches us, that grace that He comes with continuously, and He never gives up. So for me, I think in conflict handling, that is a great example for me of how He pursues us and how we need to pursue others in love. The great big thing over all of this, the great big banner over all of this is in love. Rebuke others in love. Teach others in love. Give your opinion in love. Don't think that you've got it all together. I'm like looking at all of my little crypt notes now, and I can't get the specific verse, but where it says, first take out the log out of your own eye before you speak to your brother about that little thing. Make sure, search your heart, ask God to search your heart before you get opinionated and get into a conversation that might end up in a conflict and that could have been avoided.
Same thing that I also got was exactly that we must allow the Spirit to direct every part of our lives. And the scripture I got was all in line with that, specifically that we shouldn't be arrogant, we shouldn't look down on others, we must first look at ourselves, unless we also fall in the same trap.
On into the more practical side of understanding what are the different things that really impact the way we hear things, the way we see the world, and then eventually also the way we communicate to others. So yeah, maybe you can just touch for us on those aspects.
Okay. As I was thinking about this, there was two things for me personally that came up from this. And it was the first thing for me that I had to come in terms of why do I communicate in a certain way? Why do I listen? Why do I manage conflict in a certain way? It is mainly because of what I'm used to. How I grew up, what happened in my past, what examples that I have as a child. Things like, if you think about children, we used to hear that you see children, but you don't hear children. So that's the way that you believe children should be communicated to. And it's in every part of our lives. If we think about marriage, if you think about people, parenthood, children, all of these things, there's so many things that happen in our past, and that actually made we follow suit. We follow what we see, and the world painted this picture for us of how it should be. And a big problem is then you come into relationships, then you come into the world, you meet friends, you marry, you have family, and we have so many. The second thing is we have so many preconceived ideas. We have these ideas of how it should be, how the relationship should be, what parenthood should look like, what our children should be like, what our friendships should be like. And it's all these fabricated expectations. So in our heads, we might not be physically doing this, but in our head, we have this list of relationships, we have list of ideas, of timelines. You should be married at this age, you should have this at this age, this should happen at this age. And we have all these ideas. And a big problem is then we come and we face reality. And reality doesn't look like our preconceived ideas. It doesn't look like the things that we fabricated in our mind. It doesn't look like this picture that the world painted for us. And I think then it happens that we get frustrated. Then we communicate in the wrong way, we listen in the wrong way, and we are unable to manage conflicts because we have this wrong worldly perception of how things should be. And the things that just came up for me, because I was thinking in my head, but why is this so bad? Why is it so bad? So the first thing is that reality fails us, because that's what happens. Isn't like the fairy tales. It's not like the movies we watch. It doesn't happen in the same way. And we get frustrated with that. And it's based on a perfect world. This picture that painted is based on a perfect world where everyone is exactly the same and everyone is this perfect human beings. And the other thing is it's based on a worldly example. And the thing is, like Susanne said, that we must go back to the source of relationships. We must go back to God and what His nature is, because relationships didn't originate in the world. It originated in God. He was the founder of it. He was the maker of it. He planted it. He started it. He started first relationship with us, and then He gave Adam a wife, and He started relationship between them based on His relationship with Adam, based on the way they listened to each other, based on the way they communicated with each other. But it was so quick that this relationship was, like she said, it was gone. And we didn't have this perfect example. And then we went to the world. And we should come back to the principles of God. And that's one of the hardest things to do, because our minds are so fixed on how we grew up. What is our preconceived ideas that it's actually very difficult to rip up this list that we have made. It's so difficult because it challenges us. It challenges us to change. It challenges us to realize that what we've been believing for so long is so wrong. It's so not according to God's word. And it's based on our preferences. That's a big thing. It's not based on our purposes, because there's a difference between what we prefer and what God has purposed for us. So now we maybe get this child. We have in our heads this, how it is going to be, or how our marriage is to be, and for so long. Then we get into marriage, and it's not what we thought it would be. But still, we should ask ourselves, is this my preferences that I'm looking at, or is this the purposes of God that I'm looking at? Is this how, what does he want to teach me in this? What do I need to learn? How do I need to change? Because one thing that I realized is that if I want a better we, I must start with a better me in every relationship, whether it is with our friends, with our families, with our spouse, with our children. The better we become, the nature of God, the better our relationships become. Then we start to know how to listen, how to communicate. We start to do it in love. We start to do it in kindness, with patience, and not with this ideas of this is how it should be and this is it. He is more interested in our destinies. He's more interested in the purposes that he has for us than he is in our preferences, in the things that we want and the ways that we want to do it. So he will do everything in his power to get us where he wants us to be, but still he does it in this gentle manner, in this kind manner where he guides us, but it doesn't always look like we thought it would look. And I think that's the biggest thing, to let go of all our preconceived ideas and start asking God, how does he want to do this? How do we get through this his way? What does he want to teach us? And how do we serve in where we are now, and how we need to get to where we want to be?
For me, culture was something that played a very big role. And we're not going to now pretend that you don't know that I'm Black. I'm very Black, and we are very cultured people. And I realized that sometimes culture and how we are brought up influences the way that we communicate, and also religion. Because we are at a space in our lives as Black people where everybody else is right, but the woman is wrong. Like Nita said about, you have to see the child but not hear the child. It's something very supreme. Whichever relationship we find ourselves, there's a dominant person that is always the male part of it. So I'm saying this because women are caught up in that space where they cannot even have an open relationship with their father and their God, because their fathers and their husbands, or the male influence in their life, represents what God is in their life. So we end up having communication or having a relationship with God based on what we think it is supposed to be, because of the influence of our male or our heads and all that. So when I looked at it, I'm like, okay, I don't think they have seen it this way, but people are being very are put into captivity, and in this sense that we can't have a free flow relationship with God, because God to us is somebody who is authoritative, who does not listen, who is a disciplinarian, who is all that we experience in our male and dominance in our culture. And also religion didn't do anything better, because it started segregating us also from the congregation to say, it's no more that much, but that mentality is there, that I can be in the house of God, but I'm like a second degree, how do you call it? A second citizen in the house. So it's mostly religion, it's mostly culture. And I think, as Susan said, if we can know God for ourselves, and this is what I'm saying to every Black person listening to me, that sometimes we are in that way that we don't know God for ourselves. We don't know God for who He is. We would like to know God, but then people show us God. So we are having a relationship based on what we see other people are. And I think this morning we were having a morning devotion, Nathaniel and I, my husband and I were having a morning devotion, and we realized how the pulpit speaks so much or influences our relationship with God. Because if we as people do not take God for His word or take Him as He is and how He communicates with us, but we see God through somebody's experience on the pulpit, then our lives does not line up, because that is not what we are experiencing. We are experiencing as individuals. So it becomes like, is God different in that person's life? Is God another way in this life? So it all goes back to relationship, but relationship based on our own experiences with God. That's the only way we can communicate, because we know how He talks to us.
That we all are unique and have a different perspective on life, especially like both of Unita and Doreen also touched our history, the way we've been brought up, our culture, and the religion we've been exposed to, our values, our beliefs. And I think also, like Unita touched, is the hurts, the past that we've been exposed and experienced. Plays a big role in our life, and the Lord wants to bring healing, and He wants to bring truth and change, and often it's a journey. Everything doesn't happen at once, but this was something that really helped me to understand a bit better why we sometimes struggle to really see the truth or hear the truth, and what is preventing us from really receiving a message for what it is. There's a funnel through which we filter communication and life experiences. And this funnel, and with this filter, is impacted by our past hurts, our past failures, and all the things we've mentioned here. So in this life, we will have many troubles. That's what Jesus says. But He says, take heart, because I have overcome the world. So we know that the enemy has come to steal and destroy from our lives. People are not perfect. We all have free will. And often people closest to us cause the most harm and hurt. So we are not spared from hurt or trouble in this life. But we have a God that is faithful, that can take anything that the enemy wanted to ruin us, anything that we maybe made a mistake in, that we unintentionally ruined ourselves, or someone else wanted to cause us harm intentionally or unintentionally. God will use that as a stepping stone to bring victory in your life. So that is the bottom line. But these things have an impact on our life, and if we are not aware of it, we can't face it and start to work on it and bring these things to the Lord. So these are stuff that go and sit in that funnel and impacts it's like our ears and our eyes are being influenced. What we see and what we hear, we listen through those hurts and experiences. Then certain situations and people and communication patterns and styles, they then start to trigger certain emotional responses from us, which we often don't have control over. So in our subconscious, these things trigger us, they touch us, we have no understanding why, and it just takes us from 0 to 100 in 2 seconds. And I think often it's just really difficult to put our finger on what is it that's making us feel this way. Why are we responding in a way that we are? Why is this pushing my buttons? And it's the process they call of discovering, understanding yourself in that way is self-awareness, to become aware of what are the things that trigger me, why. And in the end, if we know the truth, as the word says, we can align our mind and renew it to what the truth is about the situation. But we first need to realize what it is. And so also something else that can impact the way we communicate and behave is sudden changes in our lives. I think with the whole COVID thing that happened and many people losing their jobs and financial stability, and also people who, if you go through a divorce, if you move from one place to another, if you lose a loved one, these are traumatic things that we go through. And often if you're not aware of those things, you will misread someone's communication, which may be different than usual. Or if it's not someone you even know, you can maybe like interpret their body language or what they're saying in an offensive way, not realizing that this person is under immense amount of stress and is really going through stuff.
I can just maybe just in short say thank you, Monique. That is such valuable information. I think it gives so much clarity on why we so many times just react in manners that are contrary to what we aim for. I'm thinking of something now as you were speaking. I was thinking about something that I myself experienced many times, is that I feel I'm very sensitive to criticism, very sensitive. And I could never understand why, because I grew up in a very loving household and there was always an immense amount of acceptance among us as a family. But I remember that there was a circumstance once where I was at school and I was very small still. I think I was grade 1. And we had this, I think at that stage they called it dainty cut, but they were coming to teach us about all these, the road safety and whatever. And so they had these big mats placed out on the rugby field and these ummies, and they've got these little like steering wheels and they're showing us where to go. And I remember I made a mistake. Somewhere I had to stop and I didn't stop and I went over, and I will never forget the moment when this guy said to me, "Are you stupid? I just told you stop there," and then you went straight past. And as a grade 1 little girl, I immediately took that so personal. I thought, I must be stupid. I mean, how they just taught us what to do and they just like explained it and I couldn't get it right. And I remember I took it so personal. And to this day, that moment is clear in my mind. I can remember that it did something. It definitely left a wound. And from there on, criticism is something that's hard for me to hear. And I always have to ask myself, am I too sensitive, or is this really something that is something that I should take? Because we should be open to criticism. We should be teachable. But just I wanted to just thank you again for that information, because I think everyone listening now will have something somewhere that they can relate to those aspects that you just lighted out now. Because if I look at my personal relationship, especially in marriage, where it gets very close and where there's a lot of vulnerability, this is something that I need to be attentive to, taking criticism in a healthy manner and not always being getting aggravated or angry or emotional about it.
I can maybe just end off with a scripture for us. It's just this was actually part of our preparation, and when Monique mentioned it, it just made so much sense. It's in Galatians 5 verse 25. It says, if the Spirit is the source of our life, we must allow the Spirit to direct every aspect of our life. So may we never be arrogant or look down on another. For each of us is an original. We must forsake all jealousy that diminishes the value of others. And it just stood out for me where you say that each one, we might have different perspectives. That doesn't make me right and you wrong. We must value each other as an original.
Thank you so much, Nita. Thank you, Doreen and Susan. So next session, we're going to just go a bit deeper into physically the communication side, and discussing how can we change and grow to be better listeners and communicators. And this will then really be on a practical level, like, okay, so what should I do? How should I approach it? How should I speak? So if you're not clear on that, and you know maybe the way you've tried to do it, it's not working out or achieving the result that your heart really desires, I think on a practical level, this will bless you. So please join in next time for the next session on communication and conflict management. Thank you so much, ladies.